Yeah. There we go. Okay. So, 2 weeks ago, I'm guessing most of y'all don't read, like, super adult magazines like, Newsweek and stuff like that. Okay, awesome. I mean, it's cool if you do. All right. So this was the cover of Newsweek magazine. It was written by a guy named Andrew Sullivan, who's kind of a fallen away Catholic, lapsed Catholic guy. And he didn't actually write this headline, but the headline is "Follow Jesus, Forget the Church," which definitely, if you were here last week, is a lot of what we talked about of why Jesus and the church they go together. Okay, we're going to dive a little bit deeper here tonight into that relationship, and especially about the kind of what the church teaches and how it does that. Now, first of all, before I get into like this article a little bit, I thought it was pretty funny that this cover spawned a bunch of different memes called "Super Cool Jesus Guy," because like here's Nickelback Jesus. We also have Hipster Jesus. We have Barista Jesus. Okay, so he started popping all over the place, which I thought was pretty funny. That it was just this kind of like cool rendering of Jesus. So. Here's what this article is ultimately about, because I want to touch on it. Basically, where Andrew Sullivan went with this, the author, he said that the church is okay, but it kind of gets in the way of Jesus' true message, which is, peace and love and nonviolence, which it is. But he said, whenever the church starts getting involved in your lives and actually starts telling you what to do, and actually starts making rules about how you can worship and what it really is church and what isn't church and stuff like that, then the church has gone too far and you need to just get back to following Jesus of the Scriptures and stuff like that. And there's all kinds of reasons why that's pretty crazy, and Kurt touched on it last week. But for us as Catholics, that should definitely strike a nerve. Okay? When you see a headline that says, "Follow Jesus, Forget the Church," and especially within the contents of this article, where it's just like Jesus is enough and the church is simply going to get in the way, it is going to manhandle your relationship with Jesus in such a way that you're not going to know who this cool Jesus is anymore. You're going to have this image of him that's just kind of boring and plain and maybe a little bit too graphic. Is where he was going with it. And so for us as Catholics, we should know kind of deep down in our bones that there's something wrong with that Jesus Christ and his church and his teachings are all wrapped up together. And for us as Catholics, we know that there is a specific part of the church that is like in charge of teaching, okay, called the Magisterium. All right, so that is the official term that we have for the Magisterium. Now, this is an image of Vatican II. I really talk like that, don't make fun. The Vatican II, and that's a classic example right there of the Magisterium. Okay, so here's what the Magisterium is. Really simple. The Magisterium is the Pope and the bishops united teaching about some important matter of either faith or morals, okay? So what the Magisterium is not is simply, the Pope ranting about how, the Rangers are so much better than the Yankees or something like that, okay? That would not be, while incredibly true, not a dogmatic, infallible statement, okay? That is just not an area that the church has authority over in a dogmatic way. Nor is it just simply your local bishop, like when he goes out to dinner and he says, I would like, pasta and Olive Garden breadsticks or something like that. Like that is not a magisterial authoritative statement or anything like that, okay? It's whenever the Pope and the bishops are together teaching about some important matter of either faith or morals. Okay. I was able to when I was at John Paul II, I was able to teach morality, one of the courses which the Magisterium teaches about. I was also able to coach baseball, which I loved. I love baseball. I'm not like great at it or anything like that, but I really like it. And so they were like, well, here's the JV team. Have fun with them. Like you probably won't do much harm. And so these are my guys, and I love them to death. And we were able to go out and win a couple of games and stuff like that. And at the end of the day, like JV baseball, it's just fun. Like it's not super intense varsity baseball where like you care about what scouts are looking at you and all that kinds of stuff. It's just we go out and we win a couple of games, we lose a couple of games, and that's kind of it. And we just have a lot of fun in the dugout. But what you quickly realize when you're coaching baseball is that there's a lot of rules to baseball. Like a lot, and you're like required to know all of them. Because I've always been the kind of guy, like I just kind of go with the flow, and like I kind of know most of the rules and stuff like that. Even when I was playing baseball, there was probably a bunch of rules I didn't really know. And then all of a sudden, like I had a day when I was coaching, and like the ump made a bad call or something like that, and like all the players were like, "Are you going to go argue with them? Like, are you going to go out there and like fight the?" And I was like, I don't even know what the rule is. And so really quickly I was like, okay, there's a lot that I need to learn and to in order to get in some umpire's face or something like that you just have to be able to know. Now here's the thing though. All these rules are actually what make the game of baseball a lot of fun. Okay? There's a lot of very intricate and detailed rules. But they're what make you able to go out and just have a really fun game. Let me give you another example. For those of you that don't know, St. Anne's has a softball rec league that we play in the summer. Any guys who are interested, it's a lot of fun. Go see Dan Polcari or something like that if you're interested in playing. And we just go out and we play, and we're it's like a couple of the core members and then a lot of the teens, and then a bunch of the other adults from the Coppell, Carrollton area and stuff like that. Now, Jacob Combo and I, we helped coach the kind of what would be the equivalent of the JV team, and then there was the cool kid team that really were really good and stuff like that. And again, they didn't put me in charge of that. And so, but they would go and I remember the very first day, Jacob and I we walked over after our game and we went and we're watching the really intense team play, and they were fighting over everything. Not our teens or anything like that, but these other adults that were out there, it was really intense. It's softball, summer rec league, this, that softball. You're tossing the ball up in the air and waiting 5 seconds for it to come. And they're getting really intense about it and arguing over balls and strikes and all that kinds of stuff. And the only thing that actually kept that game going was the umpire. Okay? If you were to stop and just let these adults who are good Christian men from all the local parishes, and a lot of them are from St. Anne's and stuff like that, if you were to just let them be, they would just they would be fighting over every ball and strike and stuff like that. But with the umpire, even though we all kind of dislike the umpire, and we like to boo him when he comes on field and stuff like that. And we, I don't know, this is Lou Pinella. He used to be the manager of the Chicago Cubs. And I used to love this guy because he would always fight the umpire. He was the guy who would, go, and I think this is a game where he actually picked up third base. And then, after a bad call, and he was like, you can't even have it. I'm taking it. And they were just you just took third base. Literally, you stole third base. And it's a, so, I mean, we like it when people give the umps a hard time, but at the same time, anybody who really loves baseball or even likes rec league softball, you gotta love the ump because he's what actually makes us able to keep on playing. It's nice at the end of the day to be able to be you know what, the decision's not in my hands because I can get really emotional, I can get really into it, and it's very hard for me to actually be objective about a given call. I have a really classic example. Don't cue it up yet. But, okay, I got to make sure I get the name right. In 2010, there was a guy named Armando Galarraga, and he was 9 innings into throwing a perfect game. Not only was he 9 innings into throwing a perfect game, he was 9 innings and he had 2 outs. He was 1 out away from throwing a perfect game, which for those of you who don't know, that is crazy, okay? That just actually this past weekend, somebody threw a perfect game, and he was the 21st player in, I looked it up, 143 years of Major League Baseball history. The 21st person to actually throw a perfect game. So this is how crazy, this is how on the cusp of history this guy was. So here's where this analogy breaks down. Obviously, I'm saying like the umpires are kind of like the Magisterium and they keep the game going. Where this analogy breaks down, though, a little bit, is that we all know that sometimes the umpires get it wrong, okay? So here is Galarraga at 9 innings and 2 outs, or 1 out away from pitching a perfect. So really intense moment in like baseball history and stuff like that. Easily one of the all-time worst calls in baseball history. And you could just, and I wanted to I showed that first clip, that first part of it from the stands, because I just wanted to get a feel for like the outrage that everybody had, because he was literally just 1 out away from being the 21st player in 150 years to do that. Okay, now, so this is kind of the argument that a lot of people will give when it comes to the church's magisterium. It's like, well, okay, umpires, I can kind of see the use for it, but umpires get it wrong sometimes. All right, now for the Catholic Church, though, for us, the magisterium is a kind of fancy term. What's the term that we give that says that they're never wrong? Infallible, okay? They are not capable of being fallible, of ever getting it wrong. They are infallible when they teach on matters of faith and morals. Now, why? Why do we say that? Can you go to the next one for me? Matthew chapter 28, verse 20. Jesus very clearly says, now hopefully all Christians will accept Jesus here on earth. He's saying the truth. He's not saying anything crazy or anything like that. It's not like God up the Father is, oh, you really screwed that one up. Like, go redo the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus, because you screwed some parts up. No, like, everything he says is perfect and divine. Okay, but Jesus says, in fact, this is the very last line in the Gospel of Matthew. He says, behold, I will be with you always. There will never be a time when I am not with you, when I will not be able to speak truth to you, where you will simply be lost, and you'll be wondering, what on earth would Jesus do in this situation? I will always be there with you, he says. And earlier in the Gospel of Matthew, he says this. He says, truly I say to you, whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. He's giving authority to his apostles who he's speaking there to. And if you go back and you look at within context of the text, he is not saying that to everybody. He's not saying now everybody's perfect. Now everybody is going to get it right. He's saying you will, my apostles will. And if we trace how the apostles did throughout history, how they reacted to that, they took it very seriously. They understood that they could teach infallibly and that they could pass that authority on only to their successors, the apostles, which we call bishops here today. So that authority is deeply scriptural. It's deeply historical. Let me give you a quick example of like what is the type of stuff that the magisterium teaches, okay? So in 431 AD, there was what was called the Council of Ephesus. This is where, exactly like that picture that you saw of Vatican II, where all these bishops were gathered around and the Pope was there, okay? So they did this in Ephesus, which is in Asia Minor. And they went and they gathered, and there was a heresy at the time called the Nestorian Heresy. So it was this guy, I'm guessing his name is Nestor. I don't know what his name is, but the Nestor of the Nestorian Heresy was out around, and what he was teaching was that Jesus was actually two persons. You had human Jesus, and then you also had holy, divine, godly Jesus. And these were two separate people. And you kind of just saw him as one, okay? And so a lot of people were out there being like, yeah, that kind of makes sense. I mean, he did miracles, and then he also, ate bread and drank water and stuff like that. Like, how do we make sense of the fact that God did? No, there must be two different people, okay? And so a lot of people were falling for this Nestorian heresy. And so the church got together and they said, we need to understand, because some of our priests, some of our bishops are teaching this. And they're going along with this Nestorian heresy, and we can't have that kind of, like, that's a really big deal. Is God one person? And so, is Jesus one person, I should say. And so they went in and they dogmatically, which means like they officially defined it. And they said, no, one person, two natures. That's a different thing. To say Jesus Christ is one person with a divine and a human nature, okay? Now, that kept everything together. Go back for a second. I'm not ready for that. That kept the church together, okay? The Magisterium, in its authority, says that in fact, it's only the bishops and the Pope together that have this authority to do it. And unfortunately, it's not just you and me. We can't simply read Scripture and make decisions about, big decisions about who Jesus was and what type, was he, multiple persons or anything like that. That's not up to you and me, okay? And what we've seen tragically is that when people try to make those decisions on their own, it results in disunity, okay? What we've seen is that over the past several hundred years is that whenever that happens, Christians stop even trying to agree, okay? There are currently over 30,000 different Protestant denominations out there. They just split because they disagree with one another, okay? Okay, go ahead, Mary, thank you. All right. Let me take you back to one of the very first splits that we had, okay? Now, I like to give them nicknames. And so Martin Luther, in my mind, in my head, I always say Marty Luther, and Johnny Calvin. Now, these were two of the very first reformers, okay? So, Martin Luther let me get the years right. Okay, in the year 1517. Now, each of these two men, Martin Luther was a monk. He was an Augustinian monk within the Catholic Church. That's important to know, okay? So he was totally in line with the Catholic Church and was a monk, and then he decided to start preaching that you could be saved by faith alone. It was not faith and works together, okay? So then within 19 years of his breaking off of the Catholic Church, John Calvin came along and said, yeah, and in fact, each one of you, you're predestined. It's not a matter of even are you responding in faith, let alone as well as in works. It's just, it's a given. Either you're going to heaven or you're not, okay? And quickly, not only, see, here's the thing. A lot of our Protestant brothers and sisters do not simply, they'll say that, yeah, there's this kind of disunity, but we all agree on the basics and the importance. Y'all, those are huge, big differences. To say that, no, you're actually predestined, you don't even have a choice as to whether or not you're going to heaven or hell. That's huge. Okay. I want to give you a little bit of advice here as far as what to do when you do disagree with a teaching of the church. Okay? First of all, if it is a matter of dogma, of like officially defined stuff that you are going to find here in your catechism or in your UCAT, my advice to you is to pray for two things. First is for humility. The second is for wisdom and understanding, okay? The dogmas, the stuff that's in like the catechism, those are non-negotiables. If you're like, Immaculate Conception, not really down with that, the church is not going to listen to you and be like, oh, tell me more, please. Like, why aren't you, this is a matter that it's defined, it's not changing, okay? And so I would pray for humility first for you. If it is a matter of a big issue, then stop and admit to yourself, I don't get it right all the time. I'm not perfect. In fact, I am not the one who is infallible in this situation. I mean, stop and think about it. If there are some issues that you have going on that you are not okay with the church about, I don't agree with the church on this issue, therefore I'm right? Therefore, the church that Jesus Christ set up and has been going on for 2,000 years must be wrong, and they've been doing it wrong all along. I came along, I figured it out. Pray for humility, okay? Pray for wisdom to be able to understand why. Is that if this is an issue that is not a big dogma issue, but it is more an issue that is smaller, it's more how the church teaches maybe, or the way it's just an issue that is up for debate and theologians are debating it. Awesome. Look, if you are the type of, I always say this to like our Bible study and stuff like that. If there is not an issue in the church that you are wrestling with, that you are struggling to understand and to believe in, then you're not taking the church seriously enough. Let that sink in. You should. If you pick up this book and you're like, yeah, I get it, it's awesome, everything in here, then you're not taking what it says here seriously enough. Because this should challenge you. This should, deep down inside of you, there should be some things in here that don't sit right with you. Not because they're wrong, but because guess what? We're all sinners. We're wrong. We get things wrong sometimes. We don't have it all perfect, okay? It should strike you a little bit. Now, what do you do if it is something that is non-dogmatic? Fight for it. Pray for it. Continue to pray for wisdom and for humility. But guess what? The difference between Martin Luther and like St. Francis of Assisi, who was also a reformer, is that St. Francis tried to reform the church. Here's the thing. The term Reformation, it's a joke. It's a joke, okay? The reformers did not reform the church. They started new ones. That's not reform. That's going off and saying, I disagree. I don't even want to talk to you people anymore. I'm going to do my own thing. That's not reform, okay? St. Francis dealt with a lot of corruption in the church. But he did it within and by fighting for purity within the church, okay? There's a categorical difference there. So I pray and I hope that for each of us here, that when we find issues that we're struggling with a bit, and we ask ourselves, who says? Who says that I should believe like that? That you know that it is Jesus Christ behind it all. Because we all need it. We all struggle.